San Rafael City Council meeting of Monday, July 15th, 2019. Ask you to join us to pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We did meet in closed session. I'll ask our city attorney if there's any reportable action.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. No reportable action was taken in closed session.
Thank you very much. We'll turn to time for public expression, an opportunity for you to address us on items that are not on this evening's agenda. Of course, we won't be able to take action, but nevertheless be interested in your point. And I do have one card, Patty Bassett. Good evening.
My name is Patty Bassett, and I have lived in the Bay Area my whole life and in San Rafael for 19 years. In less than 72 hours, I will be living in my new home in Wilmington, North Carolina. For at least the last 8 years, this city has been in a downward spiral, and there is no end in sight. That was a major factor when we made the decision to move away from here. In mid-April, our locked and secure garage was broken into and 2 bikes were stolen. One of them cost $2,300 new, and to purchase a new one, used one now at $1,600. I believe this is breaking and entering and robbery. We reported it to the police, and it took 1 week for an officer to come look at the videos we have. My husband spotted the thieves close to our home and took clear photos of them. We called the police, left a message, and never received a call back. I suggest that you go to the Nextdoor website and search for bike thieves. You will see their pictures there and many comments about them. It is really interesting reading for considering all the comments that were made. One of the guys in the photos is smoking. His name is Damien, and he lives on Pacheco Street with a person who is living in Section 8 housing. He shouldn't be hard to find. Maybe you should revisit your mission statement. To quote part of the mission statement, it says to enhance the quality of life and provide a safe, healthy, and prosperous and livable environment. It is not safe in this city with all the thieves running the streets and nothing being done about it. It's not a livable environment. I think the San Rafael Police Department should reevaluate their priorities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Seeing no one, close and come back for the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have a few update items this evening, and the first one is regarding wildfire issues. I know the Council's very up to speed on all things wildfire, but largely for the community and those that will be watching this, there's a lot going on as it relates to wildfire prevention and preparedness right now. At the regional level, there's a lot of work going on with the county and all jurisdictions in Marin at a number of different levels, one with all the fire chiefs working together, all the city managers working together, and the elected officials working together as well. So there's a lot of coordination that's going into what wildfire prevention methods do we use now versus what we could with a more robust regional plan. How would it be structured, how would it be operated, how would it be funded, all of those things are happening right now. At the local level, the Wildfire Advisory Committee that Mayor Phillips and Councilmember Bushy are working with as a community group has been regularly meeting as well, and they're more focused on the 38 points of the wildfire prevention action plan that the council accepted earlier this year, and going through those points and determining how we move forward on those things, which we can move forward now, which need more work, that sort of thing. So that's going on. I did want to mention at the neighborhood level, thanks to the Federation, which put together a fantastic meeting last week, which is on our city's website along with all the council meetings, so you could watch it if anyone was not able to attend. And Mayor Phillips kicked that off, and there was representatives from both the county and the city of San Rafael of kind of what's happening regionally, what's happening here in San Rafael, and what community members can do at their own home. There's more to come. That's a lot of kind of educational, informational opportunities, but One topic that at the community meeting last week that didn't have a lot of discussion was the PG&E and the power shutoffs, because PG&E is planning a community meeting on July 30th. They're doing an open house at the Embassy Suites from 6 to 8 p.m. To go through a number of issues, including their plans for a public safety power shutoff program. And then they also are doing a webinar for those that can't make it that particular night, and that's on July 22nd from 6 to 7:30. It's a pretty convoluted link to get to it, so we're going to put it on the city's calendar. So if you just go to the city's calendar, you'll be able to find where that webinar is I think probably more easily than if you go to pgne.com. Outside of wildfire, the renter regulations that the council spent a lot of time on over the past few months go into effect this week with the mandatory mediation ordinance and the just cause ordinance. So we've been doing a lot of work as far as getting information up on our website and videos and forms and other things in English and Spanish, because we're expecting that as of Wednesday, when the ordinance both ordinances go into effect, that people will start looking at those and wanting to take advantage of those. Something that's going on tomorrow is we'll be doing the ribbon cutting for the Francisco Boulevard West multi-use path. That's going to be about 2:15 p.m. As soon as the mayor can get there from his prior commitment, and that'll be at the Anderson Drive grade crossing. So that's a fantastic project. There'll be a lot said about it tomorrow. The thing that I'll say about it now is just that there's no City of San Rafael General Fund money going into that project whatsoever. It's about 95% funded by other entities, and the funds that San Rafael does have going into it are transportation-related funds. So that's exciting to be able to have the ribbon cutting on that tomorrow. And then lastly, I wanted to say kudos to the Business Improvement District, the BID, for a great event they had on Saturday, which was their first annual Hops and Vines stroll. It's kind of I think of it as a different spin on an event they had in the past, but it felt very different. They had a series, many businesses participated in our downtown core along 4th and off of 4th as well. And that was fantastic to see. So it wasn't just restaurants or a brew pub, but it's also retail, a design store in West End, a mattress store, anything that we have. Businesses were participating, and it was very well attended and a great way to get people to see. Anyone that I ever attend these sort of events with always remark how surprised they are at the great array of really fantastic things we have on 4th Street and in downtown. So you only have to look a little bit and find all these great things. So I just wanted to say kudos to a great event to the BID. Thank you.
Good summary. A lot of things are happening, and I am meeting with the Marin IJ tomorrow as chair of SMART to have a discussion with them. So it's not that I'm goofing off. Not that you necessarily implied that, but hope to get there at a little after 2. Looking forward to that, certainly. And you're right about the wildfire on both counts. An excellent meeting here last week. Place was not only packed, it was standing room only, so it was well attended. And the work we're doing, thanks to the chief and Quinn, with regard to our 38 points, is moving along. We've had 2 meetings now, good input from the community to refine the framework, and we'll then, once we have it flushed out, present that at least 3, maybe 4 occasions throughout the community to get further input and reaction to the plan. So we're going about that in a fairly logical way, I would suggest, and making progress, and certainly thank Maribeth for her efforts as well. With that, we'll move to the consent calendar, of which we have items 4A through a bunch. 4R, most I think I've ever seen. We'll act upon those with a single motion, unless someone would to have an item or items pulled. I'll ask for item I, 4I, to be pulled, and ask now for any public input with regard to any of these items. They'll be acted upon in a single motion. No one? Close and come back for a motion with regard to the items with the exception of I.
Subject to item I move passage of the consent calendar.
Second.
And then second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy. Aye. Councilmember Cullen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
Aye, matter carries 5-0. And turning to I have a fairly simple question. I think it's Marin County multi-jurisdictional local hazard mitigation. I wanted to get some additional input with regard to this item as it might pertain to our wildfire action. I don't know if that would be you or the chief. I gave the chief a heads up, or Quinn, any of the above. Thanks, Quinn. Right there is fine. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. How is everybody?
Good.
So specifically as it pertains, it doesn't supersede at all our hazard mitigation plan, which is incorporated via an annex that you approved about a year ago at this point. Certainly addresses a lot of the wildfire points, and so if anything, it actually opens up some potential funding avenues, just like when you adopted the plan or a year or so ago, the FEMA grant mitigation money that's potentially available through that still remains, and if anything, increases our odds because of our collaborative approach. And Tom Jordan with the county is here if you have any other specific questions about kind of the process they've gone through, the other cities that have already adopted or anything else like that.
Thanks, and thanks, Tom, for being here last week. Good meeting, I thought, and you're a good participant. Any questions? Anyone from the public wish to address this item? Close, come back. I'm satisfied. Motion would be appropriate.
I move approval of item 4I.
Second.
Moved and second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy. Aye. Councilmember Cullen.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
Aye, matter carries 5-0. And therefore, we shall move on to special presentation, including our Employee of the Quarter and proclamation for Americorps. And welcome, everyone. We'll go down to the podium. Well, I'm particularly pleased, these are always special, but not to distinguish one from another, but I'm particularly, if for whatever reason, to recognize this evening's quarterly Employee of the Year, who's been absolutely, come on up, Quinn Gardner. Thank you. I do have a couple of things to say about Quinn, but I want to start by once again thanking Quinn. We made reference earlier to the wildfire plan that we're now addressing for the community, 38 points that have been specified by our professionals, our chief and Quinn and others within the department, to help us as a community address what many of us, if not all, perceive to be a real threat, more so now than perhaps ever before, with Santa Rosa and Paradise as maybe the most obvious examples. But with little direction from us, and therefore they get all the credit as it should be, came up with the 38 points, spot on. We have a committee that's reviewing them. Quinn is chairing that. Mary Beth and I are there in the wings, but certainly Quinn gets all the credit for the progress we've made thus far, and certainly the end result, which will be fairly soon, and we'll present it back to the City Council for adoption, and then again to our community. We may switch that order, but it'll go to the community as well. So Quinn, personally, I want to thank you very, very much for the effort you expended. It's been a delight working with Quinn. But somebody wrote some stuff, so I need to cite some of this. So it is a emergency manager. I think everybody knows that. Proclamation. Emergency Manager Gardner began her role in the city of San Rafael in April of 2018, so a little over a year ago. And immediately began an enhanced disaster preparedness programs for the employees of the city of San Rafael, those who live, work, and visit our community by improving our ability to efficiently respond to and mitigate major emergencies and natural disasters. And she wrote and developed a highly unique one-hour get-ready program, and you might talk about that for 1 second here in a minute, where the objectives of delivering essential emergency disaster preparedness information in a fast-paced and condensed format for the community. And upon receiving direction and oversight from the fire chief, authored the comprehensive wildfire action plan I made reference to a moment ago, and subsequently made numerous presentations to various groups within the community, marketing the plan and educating people on the critical need to prepare for the wildfires. and with extensive competition from across the nation, applied for and successfully obtained at no cost to the city an Americorps Ncc team consisting of 10 members that, upon her direction and oversight, conducted flammable vegetation removal and related fire safety projects for the city's wildfire urban interface areas for a 12-week period. And upon recognizing the urgency and the widespread disruptive community impact of PG&E wildfire prevention public safety power shutoff protocol, launched a training strategy to help the city better prepare and meet the challenges that will be presented by these multi-day outages. And therefore, I, Gary Phelps, Mayor of San Rafael, do hereby proclaim my sincere appreciation of Quinn Gardner. Please help me thank you.
Mayor, it's not often that we get to brag about some of the members of the city family, but in this case, the fire family. So occasionally you meet someone that not only do they exceed your expectations, but you just say, wow. And Quinn originally hails from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, my mother's hometown. And in fact, Quinn's mom, Lynn, is with us. So hi, Lynn. Thank you for joining us. Visiting from back east. And she's just been terrific. So Quinn is not only a great person and a wonderful human being, but she's quite capable and compassionate. Emergency management comes to her readily. She's got excellent communication skills. She's articulate and bright. She blends well in virtually every aspect of the community. She received advanced degrees and advanced training in emergency management, but can also operate a chainsaw, and I mean really use it as a federal bee faller. I mean, and she can teach it, and the Americorps team will probably attest to that. Well, I'll take that. And in addition to that, also has a whole host of other skills, including photography, worked as a barista, you name it, and I think Quinn is capable of doing it, and we are definitely better off since Quinn joined us, and I just couldn't be more pleased to join you in introducing her, Mayor, so thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Oh, geez. Well, thank you. There's not much I think I can say, and I think what I said at the 52, or that event, it's really a team effort, and the fire department has been wonderful to work for. The city management and the senior management team has been wonderful to work for, and of course my family and partner support. But it's really a team effort, and emergency management isn't one person, and making our community safer isn't one person, and I'm just grateful for everybody that constantly shows up and takes this stuff seriously and recognizes that together we're all more resilient. And since you asked, the 1 hour to get ready class, July 24th. So I try to do those classes at least once a month, so if anyone in the community hasn't been to one, they're always on the city's website, and of course encourage everybody to attend so you can be more ready and more resilient.
Excellent. I want to congratulate you as well.
Thank you.
And Andrew, per usual, raises a good point, I think, and that is, do we get to thank her mom? And yes, absolutely. Come on down here. Oh, you got plenty of time. Thanks for joining us. Thanks so much. I'm delighted. We're going to have a little picture. I'll give this to you so I don't forget to. Let's have a little picture. We gotta have a photo. No, Mom, wait a minute.
Spoken like a true mother.
A dozen copies for you. And yes, we do have one more proclamation for Americorps Ncc, which we're delighted to have you with us this evening, and of course prior helping us out with some of our wildfire issues. So thank you so much for that. And I'll read a portion of this, which says, Americorps National Civilian Community Corps, NCCC, is a program that engages thousands of 18 to 24-year-olds in team-based national and community service projects across the United States. Americorps Ncc partnered with the City of San Rafael to support wildfire mitigation projects for private homeowners as well as public open space, and Americorps Pacific Region Green 2 team, which began its 12-week service project in San Rafael in April of 2019, includes the following team members: Megan, Spencer, I'm not going to get all these right, I'm apologize in advance. I'm not, Mariah, close enough I hope, Evan Holmes, Martinez Ramirez, Alvarez, I think the last name, I hope I got that right, Thomas Nicholson, Michael Farley, Alex Marchman, and Amanda Munn. I hope that's close. Did you recognize some of those anyway? In any case, Americorps team has helped more than a dozen homeowners achieve defensible space by removing the juniper and other hazardous materials and fluids. You guys ought to stand up at least, or come up here, one or the other. Come on up here, if you wouldn't mind. We do want to recognize you for your efforts. Thank you. The Americorps team has helped more than a dozen homeowners achieve a defensible space in removing juniper and other hazardous fuels, and Americorps team has helped maintain our open space by pulling invasive Scotch and French broom, cutting down seasonal grasses, and removing debris from fire roads in the following areas across the city: San Rafael Highlands, Terra Linda, Mount Marin, McNear's Beach, and Peacock Gap. Their participation keeping the spirit of San Rafael Wildfire Prevention Protection Action Plan we've made reference to earlier, and as such helping to make our city safer in a cost-effective manner. Now therefore, I, Gary Phillips, Mayor of San Rafael, do hereby proclaim my sincere appreciation to Americorps and each and every one of you. Thank you so much for helping us out. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you. Who else could run a chainsaw? Any of you folks? Yeah. Oh, okay. Congratulations. Congratulations. Say hi to our friends over here. Give that to you as well. Well, thanks again. Appreciate on behalf of San Rafael. Have a great evening. Thanks. Thank you for bringing that up. Now I feel somewhat embarrassed.
Don't say anything.
Special public hearing, 6A, Point San Pedro Median Landscape Assessment District.
We didn't expect to be
there we
this
are.
far into the agenda already, Mayor. You're moving right along. Bill
Are
Guerin
you
with
jealous we're not
Public
going to have a
Works.
picture together? Seemed like the order of the day. I don't know.
Talia Smith is here. She's going to present both assessment districts. As you know, she's been working on all of our assessment districts for Public Works. She's about to go on an extended vacation, so if you have a lot of good questions for her, now is your opportunity to ask them. But we're going to start with Point San Pedro Median Landscaping, and I know that Kevin and Jim Dixon, Kevin Haggerty and Jim Dixon are in the audience as well in case you have questions for them. So I'll let that stand and have Talia present the report.
Thank you. Good evening. As well as Al Cornwall is here as well. He also, CSW Stroh did the engineer's report as well for these assessment districts. So we'll jump right into it. We'll keep it pretty brief tonight. So Point San Pedro medians, What we're doing this evening is a public hearing, and these are the sections of the Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972, which require that we hold, not only bring a staff report to council as we did on June 3rd, but then hold a follow-up public hearing as well, notifying residents what the rate will be that year. The Point San Pedro medians, here is a photo from 2008 and 2018, are an assessment district that was formed for the landscaping maintenance of the medians along the Point San Pedro Road. The district was formed in 2011, and both city and county properties, as you know, are assessed, although the city continues to be the lead agency on this assessment district. There's two portions, the capital and debt service assessment, and then the second portion is the operations and maintenance portion of the assessment, which pays for essentially the operating costs of this district every year. As you know, last year was the first year that we had actually increased the assessment at all since the inception of the district. We did this after working extensively with the community to try to keep pace with the actual costs of maintaining the district. This year, again, we went out to bid for our annual landscape maintenance contract, and the market has certainly gone up for contractors doing this type of maintenance. When we went back to our numbers, we decided that the best course of action, our recommended course of action for the coming year for 1920, was to actually levy the maximum allowable rate. The reason that there is a $12 jump is because there were a number of years where there was an allowable rate, either 3% or the CPI, and the rate was foregone, the assessment was kept flat. So essentially we're catching up for a few years. However, going forward, the maximum increase will be either 3% or CPI. Why the increase? Last year with our revenues prior to this increase, we collected about $96,000. However, our budget for the coming year is greater than that, so we are catching up. We do have I would say a short term, not even that long term, but the next few years we really do expect the revenues to be equal to the expenditures in this district. In the meantime, we have been paying down the difference with some fund balance that's available in the Operations and Maintenance Fund. It is important to the Road Coalition members that are here to acknowledge that there certainly have been some maintenance issues with this district. We continue to work with both the community and the contractor very, very closely to address those. But I kept those in there because it's important to acknowledge that. This year we had several new improvements that were very exciting. We brought CSW on board instead of Wildan to be the financial services consultant for the district. We did a lot of really, really good cleanup with that. We have a new engineer's report in a new format. We've actually doubled the maintenance on these medians from April through October. We have additional litter pickup, and we did a request for proposals this year for the landscaping maintenance, and we got a lot of community input actually from those in the area that inputted on what kinds of things they would like to see for our new contract that started July 1. Finally, this is just Proposition 218. This came up as a question because we are levying the maximum allowable rate within the allowable increases. We do not actually have to return to the voters to levy an increase over the prior year. We would if we were proposing an increase above the maximum allowable rate. And this slide was just to let you know that we certainly have been working very closely with the community members, and they have also been reaching out on Nextdoor, as well as in their Point San Pedro Road Coalition meetings to get community input. Finally, here's your two options for this evening. You may conduct the public hearing and adopt the resolution, thus ordering the levy of the assessments for the coming fiscal year, or you may not adopt the resolution, which will result in no levy of assessments for the coming fiscal year. That being said, we open up for questions and the public hearing will be open.
Nice presentation. Any questions of staff at this point? Public. Kevin.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Kevin Haggerty. I'm a board member of the Point San Pedro Road Coalition. I'm also chair of the roadway committee. And the roadway committee our roadway median subcommittee has worked closely with city staff, and I certainly want to commend Bill Guerin and Talia for working closely with us over the last couple of years on coming up with a financial plan that makes sense, and also on helping work through some maintenance issues. So on behalf of the coalition, I would recommend your support of this measure.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for all the work you do in this area. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Jim Dixon. I live in San Pedro Cove, and I am the chair of the subcommittee, median subcommittee. And last year at this time when I came before you, I mentioned I hoped that I didn't have to come back the following year and talk about litter, mulching, dead plants, and water problems. Well, a year has passed, and I really could address those same issues, but a great deal of improvement has been made in this past year, in spite of the abundance of rain that we had, which created an abundance of weeds. And from that, we got abundance of complaints from the people along the way. But dealing with them and calming them down was really easy to do because they saw that there was a response to their concerns. I want to basically say that I really would like to extend our kudos to Bill Guerin's team and Talia and Aaron Tubbs. Aaron Tubbs has done a remarkable job in keeping us informed as to his conversations with the Gardeners Guild. Gardeners Guild, they're still a little bit of a sore spot for us. They don't seem to, they say they do things and we find out they don't. But now Aaron Tubbs was right on top of them and said, you said this, I went out and took pictures and it's not done. Gardeners Guild said, we'll get right at it. And so they are responding. So we're really impressed with the supervisory obligations of the city, and we just hope the Gardener Guild will respond in the same manner. Kudos to the team.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Maybe we'll have a picture after all. Anyone else? Close and come back. Further discussion or perhaps a motion?
I'd like to make a motion if I
Please.
could, but
Yes,
first,
please.
just a quick comment, and that is to thank staff for the hard work that goes into this every year, but also to thank Jim and Kevin for their hard work. It's a thankless job to work so diligently on behalf of the community. I know, given all the input you received, most of it negative. Thank you for that, Jim. I understand that. But then to do so very cooperatively with staff and to ensure that it's a productive engagement so that really the community in the end benefits. It just represents a lot of hard work, and I want to thank both parties to this effort. So with that, I would move that we adopt the resolution.
Good point. Is there a second?
Second.
Moving second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy. Aye. Councilmember Collin.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
Aye, matter carries 5-0. Thank you again, gentlemen. And ladies and gentlemen.
We're going to then move on to the
We'll,
Bay Point Lagoons landscaping
Yes,
and
you
lighting.
just stay right there. We'll move on to Lagoon, item 6B.
All right, these slides will look awfully familiar. Skip right over this one. This one was formed a little earlier, in 1999, and it was originally formed with the development in the area, and it was to protect wildlife habitat and water quality in the lagoons. This is a quick map just showing you exactly what part of East San Rafael we're talking about. This is the boundaries of the assessment district. The funds are now directed towards two major purposes. One would be the K's stormwater pump station, which is located inside the assessment district, so improvements at that pump station in order to better regulate the water in and out of the lagoon, which is tied to the second reason, because the better we can regulate the water remotely, the more we can keep down the odor control, which is the number one thing that we hear from homeowners probably in the area as regards to the lagoon. Good news, the K's pump station is underway. Our operations and maintenance staff are looking at different improvements to the pump station as well as the design. I could not speak to the specifics, but it's called telemetry, and apparently you can operate it remotely and better, like we said, regulate the water flow. This is the major source of the odor in the area, so we're in summer, so it's worse. This is the assessment. It has been held constant since the formation of the district in 1999. And these are the two options you have tonight. One would be to conduct the public hearing and adopt the resolution, thus ordering the levy of assessments for 1920. The second one would be to decline the resolution, which will result in no levy of assessments for fiscal year 1920.
Okay, I want to personally thank you because I remember going out there on occasion when the circumstances were somewhat strained, if you will. So thanks for the progress you've made and the efforts you've put into improving this area. Any questions of staff? Public? Close. So thanks again. A motion with regard to this item would be appropriate.
Move approval of the resolution.
Second.
Moved and second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Collins.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
Aye, matter carries 5-0. And Jacoby Street, is that you? Okay.
Switch players. Thank you, Mayor. We're now moving on to Jacoby Street. We have a portion of the historic Jacoby Street, which runs through Marin Sanitary's property. And Josh Minshaw is here to talk to that. I recognize that Joe Garbarino's in the audience as well, has an interest in this. So we'll move right into the presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening. So Jacoby Street has been the historic route to San Quentin prior to construction of Anderson Drive and the Freeway 580. So for context, you can see the section of Jacoby Street from the two red arrows is the section that's looking to be abandoned. Here's a little bit of a surveying document showing that in more detail. You can see a portion of it was actually abandoned previously, but not totally abandoned due to some pre-existing utilities. So if we zoom in, Marin Sanitary Service has gone through a process where we went through notifications. A couple of the utilities, PG&E, SRSD, and MMWD objected to the original abandonment. They requested reservation of their rights for utilities through that area. MMWD has received a recorded easement and has withdrawn their objection, but the remaining easements for PG&E and SRSD are currently proposed and included with this staff report and included with the resolution as a requirement that MSS satisfy their needs. So the one in blue was for PG&E and the one in green is for SRSD. So those would remain after the abandonment. So just to sum up, the master use permit for MSS was revised in 2015. It reiterated a condition that this section of Jacoby Street be abandoned. Marin Sanitary Service actually owns the underlying property, so we would be abandoning our easement over it. And the city does not maintain any improved infrastructure over that property. And it is not anticipated to be needed in the future. And so with the easements provided to the individual utilities, we believe that we can proceed with the hearing under the Streets and Highways Code. And with that, I'll leave the image back up if there's any questions.
And thanks for the presentation. Any questions? Public. Terry. Yes, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm Terrell Mason. I'm the legal representative for Marin Sanitary Service, and I want to compliment Josh for his work on this background. It's been a little complicated. It's taken a little time to work with various agencies, but we're finally at that point that we can now move forward, have the abandonment. Hope if the council does adopt this resolution, which we request that you do, it's part of this overall master use permit plan that Marin Sanitary has been working on for several years, and just one more component that we'd like to see accomplished, so we'd appreciate your vote for that tonight.
And thanks for the presentation. Further comments? Anyone? No. Anyone from the public? Close. Questions? Seeing none, motion will be appropriate.
I move that we adopt the resolution.
Second.
Wait a second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Collin.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
Aye, matter carries 5-0. Thank you so much. We'll now turn to D, Prius Parkway undergrounding district.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a long process with PG&E. It's called Rule 20A. They provide a certain amount of money every year into a pot of funds that we can use for undergrounding utilities, electrical wires. We've been working on this. We looked up earlier today since 1999 and did some homework on that from Councilmember Collin. Had some questions this morning that we were able to address. Hunter Young is here to present the undergrounding resolution that we have before you tonight and explain it to you, so we'll go on from there.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Council, Mayor. It's a pleasure to be back with you. Tonight we are reviewing establishing an underground utility district on Freitas Parkway. As Mr. Guerin had mentioned, in reviewing some of the staff reports from 20 years ago, what we realized and learned was there was a great discussion about what the district should include in terms of geography. Should it go from Highway 101 all the way out to the Terralina Rec Center, or should it be some subset portion of that? Let's see. Why don't we skip? Let me just go straight to the map. This will help us actually visualize what we're talking about this evening. The proposed resolution actually will create an underground utility district from Highway 101 up to Las Galinas and including that intersection. We'll get to that kind of in a moment, but let me give you a little bit of context here. So Rule 20A, as it mentions, is money that is allocated that when ratepayers pay their utility bills, PG&E sets aside a certain percentage for this purpose. And the reason we're here tonight is that another city in California has an underground utility district. They're actively working on it. The CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, has come back. They've notified the city that anybody in the state who is not actively working on a project to underground utilities, they may end up losing some portion of their funding that they've already accumulated, San Rafael being one of them. It's been a number of years since we have had an underground utility district that we've been actively working on. And so tonight, that is one proposal from staff, is to create this underground utility district with the purpose of not losing any funds. Now, I will say that in doing so, if council pursues this option, we would not be locked into this agreement. This is something that we can reverse course on down the road if council wishes to do so. Simply creating the district demonstrates good faith that we want to move forward with a project, and it helps us retain the funds that we've accumulated thus far. Okay, here we go.
There you go. Maybe the other way. There you go. Perfect.
So this evening, we've got about, the CPUC as a percentage, we're roughly estimating $17,000 is what they're looking to reallocate from our current allocation. And so we really would like to move forward with a project of something that we think can fit. The staff report outlines our overall budget. We have about, I think we can do it for about a little over $4 million, upwards of $5 million. The district we're proposing is much smaller than that which was discussed many years ago. In fact, in 2012, the city hired a consultant to review the corridor and to go from Highway 101 up through Monticello area and even to the end of city limits, but we don't have the financial ability to do so. PG&E has advised us it may be upwards of $11 million to underground the whole of Freitas Parkway. And when we look at that, we're saving a little over $200,000 a year to apply towards that. It will be a great deal of time before we're able to come back and underground the whole of Freitas Parkway. So we do propose doing this in a phased approach, and we don't have a timeline for undergrounding the whole of Freitas Parkway. We are told from PG&E it could take many years, upwards of between 5 and 10, to do this portion. Recently, as we learned, PG&E has gone, or is in the process of dealing with bankruptcy. They have hired historically third-party consultants and contractors to both design and construct these types of projects, and we're told that they've all been let go to some great extent. This particular project is primarily for beautification purposes, and as such, it does not rank nearly as high on their priority list in terms of projects that they wish to pursue or deliver in a timely manner. So we really are at the mercy of PG&E staff. We've asked if city staff could be the project lead to expedite the delivery of this project, but what we are told is that regardless, it takes a certain level of effort from PG&E's design team to provide their construction drawings. And so even if the city wishes to go that route, we simply would be waiting on PG&E and their staff to provide their portion of the documents. And with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you for your presentation. Pretty tough sell, I would suggest. Any comments, questions? Anyone from the public? Shirley. Good evening. One over here might work better for you. Yeah, thank you.
I'm Shirley Fisher from Terry Linda. I'm just really glad to see this item on the agenda for the evening. I also want to shout out to the city manager's newsletter that comes out, because that's how the community found out about this. We've been waiting for this and discussing this for at least 3 decades. I'm glad to see that it's here, even though it may take another decade to construct it. Very glad to see that that the city was on it to not lose the money for this undergrounding. Glad to see that Freitas Parkway had gotten up to the top of the list, which we've been hoping for. It is part of the long ago North San Rafael vision. It became much more important once AT&T put up all of its horrific lines. So we have this entryway to North San Rafael. The Terra Linda has become quite occluded with poles and lines. So this is, in our mind, quite a priority project. I would ask that the city not lose the second half of the project, that it really should go all the way where the North San Rafael Promenade is supposed to go. We're really happy to be that it's up and keep it on the horizon, and we would be happy to follow it and have input if that's appropriate. Thanks.
Thanks, Shirley, and thanks for your work on this, by the way.
Thank you.
Been great. Anyone else? Close, back, comments, motion,
I move that we adopt the resolution.
Second.
and moved and second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy. Aye. Councilmember Collin.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
My matter carries 5-0. Thanks again for the presentation. We'll move on to 7A, grand jury report on vaping. Very good evening.
Good evening. So before you today is a follow-up action from our June 17th, 2019 meeting on vaping. In that meeting, we discussed a grand jury report that came out from the county. They decided to look at vaping as part of this latest round of grand jury reports. This is just a follow-up action responding to the recommendations that they asked the city of San Rafael for. There's 2 main recommendations, the first being all municipalities in the county that have not banned the sale of flavored tobacco products should do so within the year. The second recommendation they've asked us to respond to is that all law enforcement agencies should coordinate the enforcement of sale bans on flavored tobacco. Both of these actions we've already taken action on. The response is mostly just summarizing the responses to date. The first one is what we took action on June 17th. The second one is actually an existing MOU that we have with the county and the sheriff's department that's been in existence for a while. With that, I'd throw it back to you.
And thank you for your report. Questions? I have one. We can maybe circle back to it. I'm not opposed to it. I'm just not absolutely certain that it's fairly stated. And that is under response 5R, and then I'll ask for public comment. 5R, the very last sentence, the city council chose to make this effective date, the effective date of the ordinance January 1st, 2021, due to the legislation being considered at the state and federal levels. I know that was a consideration, but I'm not certain that was the sole reason for doing so. We had inventory issues and business interruption concerns, et cetera. So I'm not sure that was the sole reason for doing so. And I would suggest, John, you had some comments on that, so maybe you can help me with it. Not to put you on the spot.
No,
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. It's, I mean, one of the comments that I did make at the time was that it was pending in front of the state. That I felt that there would probably be time for them to act on that, and also for not just the primary providers of the products that we were banning, but more the secondary and tertiary folks who also have it that wouldn't be covered under any other, that would be outright banned, to have them change their business model to adapt to it, to give them time to do that. I felt that, it was just my opinion, I felt that 6 months or an immediate act was not enough time for them to do that.
I thought you made the point well. I'm just not sure in this context. We'll come back to it. Any further questions, comments from
Just
staff?
a
Yeah, Mary.
suggestion, we could probably solve that problem by putting a period after 2021.
Say again, I'm sorry.
Putting a period in that sentence, the city council chose to make the effective date of this ordinance January 1st, 2021, period, and then delete the rest of it.
Yeah, I might be okay with that. Let's see if there are any public comments. Anyone? Seeing none, we'll come back. How do you react to that, John? Okay. Staff, Eric, you okay with it? Okay. Perhaps a motion, Maribeth, would be appropriate.
I move that we adopt the resolution with, sorry. I move that we adopt the resolution approving and authorizing the mayor to execute the response to the Marin County Grand Jury report entitled Vaping and Under the Radar Epidemic.
And?
Subject to that correction that we just discussed.
Yeah, thanks for that. Second?
Second.
Move to second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Collin.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
Aye, matter carries 5-0. Thank you for your report. And moving on to the General Plan 2040, Progress Report number 2. Good evening, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Phillips and City Council members. Before you tonight is Progress Report number 2 on our General Plan 2040. And joining us tonight include Barry Miller, our project manager, and also Stefan Pellegrini, who is a principal at Opticos Design that's working on our downtown precise plan. And before I turn it over to Barry, I just want to make a couple of comments, starting with the schedule. We are on schedule with the goal to adopt the General Plan 2040 and the Downtown Precise Plan in late spring of next year. I do want to mention that this is largely due to a very cooperative and a hard-working steering committee that we've had that's been working and meeting regularly every month for the last year and a half. One thing I do want to mention is that there has been some interest to do a deeper dive on some of the topic areas that we are not revisiting, but we are carrying over from our current general plan. So we're focusing that deeper dive effort on the newer topics and some of the major policies, and that's how we're able to stay on schedule. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Barry, and he's going to give you a summary of the progress report, and then we'll have Stefan Pellegrini give you a report on the downtown plan.
Hi, Barry.
Hi, good evening, council members. I'm Barry Miller, Consulting Project Manager for the General Plan 2040. This is one in a series of progress reports that we're providing to the council over the course of the general plan update. Our last report was delivered on March 4th, so tonight we're going to focus on progress made over the last 4.5 months. Tonight we'll also be seeking some feedback from the council on some of the design ideas that are coming out of the Downtown Precise Plan process, which is a parallel effort taking place at the same time as the general plan. As Paul mentioned, our consultants from Opticos will be providing an update and asking for your input on a few key points, and Stefan will be doing a presentation following my remarks. What I'd like to do first is briefly highlight our progress in 4 areas, and those areas are general plan policy development, data collection and analysis, steering committee meetings and community engagement, and revisions to the land use map. We also have a housekeeping item for you related to steering committee membership this evening. So with respect to policies, we've nearly completed our audit of policies in the existing General Plan 2020. What this involves is going through each goal, policy, and program in the current plan and evaluating whether the statement should be carried forward, edited, or deleted. It also involves identifying topics where we may need new policies and programs, and then developing that language. At this point, we've completed the audit for 13 of 15 plan elements. Each audit has been brought to the steering committee for discussion and for their feedback. We've also begun to draft the new policies and programs that will form the core of the new plan. We are on our second draft of the land use policies, our first draft of the safety element, also called the environmental hazards element policies, and we will have the open space and conservation policies, which include air and water quality, by the end of this week. Our goal is to have a first draft of all of the policies completed by November of 2019. Drafting the policies is really an iterative process with multiple drafts for each element that reflect input from the General Plan Steering Committee and also from city staff. As we're developing the policies, we are finding that some issues require more attention and focus than others. Sea level rise, certainly, wildfire prevention, these continue to be key discussion topics, as does building height and density, the future of our retail centers, and the issue of how we measure and manage future traffic impacts. And the council had a taste of that through your June 4th discussion on the shift from level of service to vehicle miles traveled, which we're continuing to discuss at the steering committee level, and we'll be bringing back to the council. Moving on to data collection, we've been documenting existing and projected conditions to make sure that our policies are grounded in data. During the last 4 months, we've completed a parcel-based inventory of existing use on every property in the city, traffic counts at 40 locations around the city, noise monitoring at 20 locations around the city, and an evaluation of San Rafael's economy and economic trends, which was just presented to the steering committee last week. An inventory of historic buildings in downtown San Rafael is now underway as part of the downtown plan. We've also documented infrastructure conditions, environmental resources, and natural hazards. Moving to the third topic, which is the steering committee, the committee continues to meet monthly and provide feedback on policies and issues related to San Rafael's future. The meetings have been well attended, with 20 to 24 members or alternates consistently showing up at every meeting. For the last few months, we've focused each meeting on a particular plan topic. For example, last week's was focused on economic development. The June meeting focused on transportation. In May, we focused on downtown. In April, we focused on parks and recreation, and so on. When feasible, we've been using personal electronic polling devices, otherwise known as clickers, so that committee members can weigh in on policy questions with real-time results on the screen. What we find is that there is strong agreement on most issues, although there are often strong minority opinions and questions about how things will be implemented, what trade-offs are involved, and how much our policies and programs will cost. All good questions. In between steering committee meetings, we're continuing other outreach efforts, including presentations to local organizations like the Downtown Bid, the CAC, the Planning Commission, and community groups. We're currently setting up meetings with neighborhood groups to work on updating the neighborhoods element of the plan. We're also working with the Canal Alliance currently to expand our Spanish language outreach program, including workshops, focus groups, and web materials in Spanish. With respect to the last item, the land use map, we issued a call for map amendments back in April of this year. This involved reaching out to property owners who have expressed interest in map amendments over the past few years. We're currently evaluating several proposed map changes with the aim of having a new draft general plan map ready for discussion at the end of October. At this point, we're not anticipating major changes to the map, in keeping with the idea that this is a tune-up of General Plan 2020 and not a brand new plan. The last item we wanted to bring to your attention, which is what I described as a housekeeping item, relates to steering committee appointments. In May, we had 2 committee members relocate out of San Rafael. In both cases, their alternates have stepped up and are now filling those vacancies. However, promoting the alternates created 2 vacancies in the alternate seats, which now need to be filled, and the bylaws require council approval of those appointments. We have a resolution for your consideration tonight, which formalizes the appointment of Jack McGinn as our youth representative and Don Blaney as our Design Review Board representative. Stuart Summers is the new Design Review Board alternate. Regretfully, we have not yet identified a new youth alternate and are continuing to solicit applications. We hope to have that alternate seat filled as soon as possible. With that, I will take questions or comments, and then we do have your resolution and a presentation and discussion item with Opticos ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you for the update. I've heard nothing but good things about the work that you and your committee are doing, so I'm pleased with that, and I suspect we all are. So thank you for the effort thus far, and I'm sure the result that will follow. Any questions or comments? No? Oh, you have a question?
Maybe I'll wait.
Okay. Anyone from the public wish to comment on this item? Close and come back? Now would be a good time.
Should Opticos present first?
I don't know. You guys decide.
That's probably better.
Okay.
That way,
Is that okay with you?
Q&A at the end.
Okay. Thank you.
And I will introduce Stefan Pellegrini with Opticos Design.
Welcome.
Get it on the screen first.
Thank you, Barry. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. It's nice to see everyone here. I'd like to take a brief time just to update you on the progress made in the Downtown Precise Plan and tell you a little bit about the multi-day design charrette that we held recently, and I had a chance to meet and speak with many of you there. Just to sort of start, and I'm going to have to rely on Barry since I can't see the presentation. Just a little bit of an update on the Precise Plan. This is a 16-month effort, as Barry mentioned, part of the general plan update process. We have an opportunity to look at previous planning efforts, of which there are many, and look at the downtown conditions to identify what future development opportunities might occur. We want to try to establish a vision for the next 20 years, thinking about both public improvements and private development that can occur within the downtown project area. We're looking at a study area which is... Oh, I can see that one over there. This will work. Got it. So we're looking at a study area that is about 265 acres, and the steering committee was key in helping us determine the project boundaries. It includes the downtown priority development area and the West End Village, and what we're referring to as the Montecito commercial area east of Highway 101. We started this process in January of this year. This is sort of a key sort of midpoint. We've had an opportunity to do much of our analysis, conduct the multi-day design charrette, and this is a pivot point where we'll start to talk about what should go into the plan and how it should be composed. So a little bit about what we've done to date. As I mentioned, we started in January with a kickoff. We engaged the steering committee twice in March and April and to speak with them a little bit about the existing conditions that we were understanding through our initial studies, and to do a series of prioritization exercises using the clickers that Barry had mentioned. This provided us with some preliminary direction for the project and process. And then we began to engage key stakeholders in the community, including a pop-up workshop in April and a series of focus group meetings that occurred in May. In the first week of May, the 8th to the 11th, we actually set up shop in downtown San Rafael for the week and engaged the community in a multi-day design charrette. And in June, we released a draft of the downtown profile report, which is available online. A little bit more about the design charrette. We began the process with a walking tour, engaged 2 different groups of about 30 participants. We had an opening presentation held at the Whistle Stop facility where we did an iterative exercise with about 65 participants. During the week, we had a series of opportunities for engagement, both formal and informal. This included a midpoint pinup, transportation discussion with about 25 attendees, and brown bag lunches on targeted topics, including historic resources and economic development. Each one of those had about 30 attendees each. Overall, we provided about 11 hours of open studio in the downtown charrette space, had about 100 people engaged with the design team, and compiled about 285 comments during that period. We concluded on Saturday morning with a closing presentation again at the Whistle Stop with about 50 participants in attendance. As I mentioned, at the same time, we completed the downtown area profile report. This went public in June. This provides a summary of existing conditions and key findings in the precise plan project area with specific components for historic resources, demographics, economic conditions, urban design, transportation, public utilities and infrastructure, and natural hazards. And a little bit about what we heard during the charrette. As Barry mentioned with regards to the steering committee, I think we heard a lot of parallels from the community. There was a strong consensus on many topics with selected and at times different opinions from that consensus. But we felt that there was strong community support for infill and reinvestment in the downtown, particularly in areas where there are key opportunities, such as the transit station area around the SMART train. We heard a lot of positive feedback regarding residential mixed-use development and a lot of desire to both maintain and improve existing public spaces in the downtown and look for opportunities to create new public open space or publicly accessible open space. At the same time, we heard a lot of support for the preservation and integration of historic resources in the downtown area, and a lot of particular discussion about the Whistle Stop property. So out of the design charrette, we formulated 6 key design principles. I'm going to review those with you quickly now, and then I'll talk about sort of a couple big picture design ideas that are related to those design principles. So the first design objective is to focus development at key nodes. The community really expressed a desire to look at ways that the distinct experience and identity of the downtown could emerge. And we also wanted to look at areas where public improvements and private improvements could be combined to find some synergy and sort of maximize impact. The second design objective is to reinforce gateways and the sense of arrival in the downtown. This has to do with a sort of orientation and connecting the downtown to the neighborhoods surrounding. We also felt it was important to signal to drivers, in particular, that they were entering the downtown area and would come into an area where there is sort of a higher activity of pedestrians and bicyclists. And that's related to the third design objective, which is to strengthen multimodal connectivity. We heard a lot of feedback from the community about the 2nd and 3rd Street corridors, and just that they establish a hard edge, particularly for pedestrians and bicyclists. And we see that in the vicinity of Highway 101 and the connections underneath the freeway and across Heatherton and Irwin. And so it's important to understand how those could be improved for pedestrians and bicyclists to connect the downtown core to the assets that actually surround downtown. The next one was to look at creating a cohesive public realm. I mentioned that there is a strong desire to both maintain and improve existing public spaces, but also to look for opportunities for new public space or publicly accessible open space in the downtown. We had a lot of discussion about how this could emerge, either with better use of existing public spaces in the downtown, or in some cases how development standards could be written to encourage public spaces or publicly accessible open spaces to emerge as parts or components of new development. And we also had a lot of discussion about the development program and policies, and we hope to come back with you with more detail on this topic when we have a chance to sort of study the precise plan more in detail with regards to the development program. But we got strong support for a development program that is supportive of transit-oriented development, particularly around the SMART station, support for mixed use in the downtown, a lot of support for housing access and affordability, and ways that we can improve the city's jobs housing balance through new opportunities for residential development in the downtown area. There clearly are some hazards and issues with regards to the downtown project area, and we had an opportunity to start discussing climate change and sea level rise. We discussed development strategies that would support adaptation to climate change, and there are some parts of the project area that are subject to flooding today and will be subject to increased flooding in the future. This is an opportunity to think about how individual properties can become more resilient. It also can be seen as an opportunity to increase public access to some of the water amenities that we have in the downtown area. So a couple of sort of big picture design ideas that emerged. One was to consider a downtown street framework that would prioritize different modes of travel on different streets, understanding that we have limited right-of-way on many streets in the downtown. And instead of trying to have every street sort of function for all users to the best available, we want to look at prioritizing different modes on different streets. And one of the objectives here was to look at ways that a bicycle network, which today comes into downtown as it's been created in the downtown in the citywide bicycle plan, to find sort of some recommended paths for that bicycle traffic to actually move through the downtown area. So we began to look at that more in detail. We discussed opportunities for a new sort of bike routes that would connect east to west using 4th Street through the West End and 5th Avenue through the remainder of the downtown area. We also looked at some opportunities for some key north-south connections and some opportunities to really sort of improve pedestrian activity and movement in the downtown, particularly along 4th Street through the transit station area and along portions of the San Rafael Creek. So this last set of images has to do with some of the illustrations that were developed during the design strat and presented at the final presentation. We created an illustrative plan which shows sort of a potential build-out outcome, 20-year vision, which is shown here in this image. And we've started to break that down into sort of 4 sub-districts in the downtown area, and we hope to sort of be able to have a more in-depth discussion about the improvements that we would envision in each sub-district, but also the amount of programmatic potential that might be possible in each district. So from sort of some degree of priority, I'll take you sort of through a series of those using some of the images that we developed. This first one is the transit station area today. Here's a view sort of at the northeast corner of 4th and Tamalpais, looking south at the existing whistle stop facility and the train platform. And during the charrette, we looked at ways that that area could be transformed into a plaza north of the whistle stop facility, surrounded by a new mixed-use transit-oriented development. Along 4th Street, we considered the private development proposals that have been floated for the new sort of Paseo and Market Hall on the south side of 4th Street, and discussed with the community ways that the Courthouse Square could be improved or provide some additional pedestrian amenities. We looked at some opportunities to, this must be a big file as it's loading slowly, eliminate some on-street parking in this location, and increase the amount of pedestrian space and create better transitions between the street and the Courthouse Square area to the north. As part of the West End Village discussion, we looked at ways that properties that might be opportunities for redevelopment could provide new publicly accessible open space. This is an example along 4th Street, and a vision of sort of an appropriate sort of infill scale that would be in keeping with that portion of the neighborhood around a small publicly accessible open space. So tonight, as Barry mentioned, we have sort of just a couple of items that we're looking for some specific direction on and discussion. The first one is these sort of design principles that I reviewed. And the second one is the emerging street framework and the idea about prioritizing certain streets in the downtown area for different modes of travel. And the third was just some of the key takeaways and some of the design opportunities that we started to share with you around key portions of the project area. Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation, and we'll have public comment, but you had a question, Andrew. Do you want to ask that now, or do you want to wait? Okay. Any other questions regarding the report, in which case public comment would be appropriate? Seeing none, we'll come back, and help me just for a second. How would you like the input with regard to the 3 items you've just mentioned?
Well,
Just a
first,
random comment, or what?
yeah,
how-
can we go back to the slide with the 3 items? And then let's start with the principles. There was and so we want to tackle these 3 items, get initial feedback, much like we did with the guiding principles for the general plan. That's the first bullet point. The second bullet point deals with the street network, because we're at a crossroads, no pun intended here, on dealing with how we want to prioritize some of the street systems in downtown. Obviously, streets that are solely for or primarily for vehicles versus bicycles and pedestrians and such. So we're looking for some feedback on that. And then any other general comments you may have. I don't know if any of you had an opportunity to review the profile report for the downtown precise plan, but it's quite comprehensive. It's really very good. So can we go back to the slide with the principles, and maybe we can I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Stefan, to this, if there's anything specific you want to bring up. What
Well,
we're
it says-
looking for
it says
is,
design, and I guess the first thing that came to my mind is, not so very long ago, we asked Larry Paul and a committee to review and come up with what he felt, and it was adopted. So therefore, perhaps we're in some degree of concurrence with regard to, quote, good design. You know, what does that mean in this context? And I'd be curious, because I can't sort out what you have there when compared to his report, to whether or not it's his thoughts, not his thoughts, but rather the committee was under his chairmanship have been incorporated.
okay, I can easily respond to that. What that effort was good design guidelines for construction, for a design of buildings,
Right.
which will be folded into this effort for the precise plan. These are more of the grander principles for the plan at large, not specifically design guidelines, which is what Larry Paul had brought forward to the council, and how buildings should look downtown rather than the grander scheme for the plan itself.
Interesting
They
distinction.
will make their way into this plan, though, I guarantee you, because it's very good work that, yeah.
That, I want to make sure of that, because he did quite a bit of work on it, and I think the outcome was good. Maybe the context a little bit different, I understand that. Other comments with regard to design principles? Please.
I do,
Yeah, please.
but it's sort of, it crosses, I think, several boundaries here, but it pertains specifically on design principles to number 6, which is the growth and adaptation strategies that are resilient to climate change and sea level rise. So about a year ago, as I recall, we were the beneficiaries of an examination done throughout the Bay Area, but an examination of our community and principally in the canal area. And we were given a presentation that spoke to how is it that we can best adapt to sea level rise and climate change in the future. And one of the tools that was shared with us, or one of the suggestions, was to use zoning as a tool. And I'm gonna oversimplify what was recommended as one possible way to use zoning as a tool, but taking the canal neighborhood as an example, it was proposed to us that if, for example, either hardening or retreat or a combination of the two were recommended, we could downzone the residential areas of the canal in order to better prepare for what inevitably will occur in that area. So how would we, if we're looking to incorporate in General Plan 2040, various sea level rise adaptation tools, how do we promote what we're being told the community wants here, which is greater density in areas that are susceptible to flooding in the future? How does that square with a combination of maybe retreat, hardening, downzoning that was proposed in an area most vulnerable, like the Canal neighborhood?
Let me first start by saying that the Resilient by Design effort was a very good and comprehensive effort, but were also some recommendations in there that were quite aggressive and very challenging. And I don't think we can go in that direction fully, but there was some shorter term recommendations that came out of that effort that we are seriously looking at on the grander scale for the General Plan 2040 at large. Some of it overlaps into downtown, and that includes using zoning as a tool, like as we intend on creating a zoning sea level rise overlay. That's one of the things that we are looking at, which will apply to the grander general plan area, but will incorporate some of downtown. And then within those areas, what are some of the things that we can do? And it may be a combination of retreat, higher building elevations and development elevations, other conditions that could include, let's say, seawalls along the bayfront. So it's going to be a combination of things. There isn't one size fits all approach, and it's certainly not going to be a grand retreat that we're looking at. It's going to be looking at specific sites that are most suitable for that sort of thing. So this is going to be a big challenge for us, but we're going to try to tackle this with the general plan effort, and I think some of those tools will overlap into downtown. Yeah.
Somewhat related.
Yeah.
As we look to, well, I guess the simple question is, how open to greater density do people appear to be as we go through the SHRED process in particular, and folks talk about residential mixed use in our downtown and in the gateway areas? If we're looking at trying to combine density with public open space, how do we achieve that balance, because they're somewhat opposed?
Yes, and maybe Stefan or Barry can touch on this, but one of the things that was discussed was, for example, let's say a site might be suitable, a private site for some public open space area, perhaps included in the specific plan, and we're looking at a form-based code for downtown, which is another conversation, but is to allow, let's say, a higher degree of development on that site to offset a portion of that land being set aside for, let's say, a public square or something like that, an incentive for the property owner to do that. So that's one of the tools that we're looking at. It could be additional floor area. And on your question regarding density, one of the things that we are looking at very seriously for downtown is eliminating density altogether and going to a floor area ratio based approach, so that it allows a developer to come in, you give them a box, and they say, okay, I think the market here best for my needs is building 100 studio units, or maybe it's 50 two-bedroom units. It's all within the same box. So we're getting away from that density figure. I think what we found in some of the workshops and the community meetings is people are open to seeing taller buildings downtown, which is a good sign. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Kate?
A few comments. So thank you. I was able to attend the SHRED and has been able to fill in for Mary Beth. Thank you. At the steering committee meetings, and there's been an immense amount of work, so thank you. And I have not delved all the way into the report that you referenced, but I do look forward to doing that. In terms of the design principle, in just general, having the key nodes, which I was thinking the word district, but then I realized nodes is kind of districts, and that slide made a lot of sense. I know that we've had a lot of discussion over the years about how the West End, like in terms of the BID, we'll be talking about how the West End might be different than the downtown, and I think that's natural in Montecito, so that makes absolute sense, and I'm glad that we're looking at going into that direction. And granted, there are going to be some philosophies that apply to all the downtown, but maybe how do we get the unique characteristics of each of those? I really didn't have very many questions, although in the second one, and Stefan, you did briefly mention it, the reinforced gateways. When I read that, I know what the words meant, but I didn't know, like, well, how does that actualize? Right, and so a gateway, obviously we've talked about having gateway. I think for us it's very important to have a nice gateway. We tend to think off of 101 is really the priority, and we'd love to have them everywhere, but you had like 4 different ones there. So I don't know if I totally get that one. I think gateway to me means like one gate, like you go in that way, so I'm not sure why.
Yeah, no, that's a very good comment, and I think there probably are more, and what we talked about were there's sort of 4 key places where it's important to be able to communicate that you are in downtown and you're sort of in the downtown environment. And the one I think that probably everyone is most familiar with is entering at the east end, where you come in onto 4th Street and come right into downtown, and what that gateway might be like. And, you know, and today there's a lot of opportunities sort of to improve that as we see new TOD and the transit center shifting location. Those will be key considerations, what that experience is like. One of the things that we noted is that, you know, when you're on Heatherton or Irwin or 2nd and 3rd, you're very much in the business of just getting through the area. And so drivers are sort of not really thinking about what's right adjacent. And so thinking about how you can actually make that 4th Street experience extend underneath the freeway and sort of, you know, to the eastern portion of the project area, that's really a design challenge to sort of help people understand that they're still in a downtown environment. Has to do with, you know, when you feel comfortable pressing down on your accelerator and when you sort of feel that you've left the downtown. So to that extent, we wanted to think about, particularly in the long term, that Grand Avenue and that area sort of in the Montecito shopping area, in the future, maybe that starts to function more like a gateway into the downtown area. Folks that are coming from the east, instead of going through the freeway, under the freeway and realizing that they're downtown, maybe that could actually start to happen a little earlier. And the design changes that you see downtown, maybe some of that could start to creep to the east. On the west side, it's really about how you sort of transition onto 4th Street and that sort of experience at the top. And there have been some design changes proposed and discussed for that intersection that probably would sort of start to make it think about a better gateway, and looking at how sort of bikes might travel through that area, and rethinking that public space that is at the west end. There are some opportunities there to sort of rethink that as a gateway. And then I think we wanted to think about the coming into the core of the downtown, particularly as if you're sort of connecting key civic spaces in the community like Falkirk and the Sangerville Community Center going north to south. And your experience on streets like A and B, and how you can sort of cross some of those barriers like 2nd and 3rd, make those sort of better crossing opportunities, and that when you're in downtown, there's sort of a sense that you've arrived at the heart.
No, thank you for the clarification and additional information, because my final comments have to do with the 3rd design principle and also the streetscape, which you touched on. And there's a great slide that you showed about pedestrian and bike access. And we've always talked about all or nothing, right? So, hey, let's close down 4th Street and have it all be pedestrian, which isn't realistic. But what I took away from this was, are there things that we can do from a design standpoint, a development standpoint, where we're encouraging more pedestrian and discouraging traffic? So not closing it off, but, you know, and I don't know what that looks like. If somehow it's slower. So as a commuter, you're less likely to go down 4th Street because it's slower. You're going to go down 2nd or 3rd, so you're actually moving the traffic or moving that there. And I don't know what that would do to traffic patterns, but I thought that was a really interesting, I don't know how that manifests, but I think that's definitely worth looking at. You did have a small statement in here, and maybe we change our one-way streets to 2-way, and I'm sure my colleagues were like, wait a minute, oh my God, because those are ingrained in us. But hey, if that would help achieve some of these, I mean, you know, that's really interesting. So I found this interesting. I look forward to hearing more, because again, I'm not sure, other than when I'm saying this is our desire, what we change on the ground to actually have that, you know, be what occurs.
Thank you. Yeah, I think just 2 sort of quick things to think about. One is that this idea of a bike lane traveling along 4th Street through the west end and then transitioning over to 5th and connecting over to the Heatherton bikeway on the east end. That would be a design proposal that would change the way that street is configured today. And so thinking about, you know, what it's like today with on-street parking and sidewalks, we looked at some options during the charrette, but those would become different streets in those locations if they were accommodating sort of a high-quality bicycle facility, which we discussed. And then the other thing I sort of wanted to mention is there was actually a lot of support from the community about pedestrian space and plazas, particularly on the east end of downtown. And some of the things that we talked about were design changes that would make the street more flexible and amenable to some of sort of the big events that occur downtown. And so, for example, there was some public discussion about changing the materials in 4th Street to actually think about 4th Street, particularly the eastern portion, as more of sort of a continuous plaza surface, as opposed to sort of what you see today with sidewalks and curbs and a street. And then, of course, that also could connect to some of these ideas around a significant central plaza around the transit station, and that those materials could be the same. And that also could be sort of a key design element that you could think about that would provide some sense of that you're in downtown, that you've arrived.
Interesting. Well, I think anytime you can have examples of that, I mean, we can all imagine different things in our head, but I think it's really helpful, either drawings or if there are other cities that have done that, those types of changes. Thank you.
Good point, I agree. John, did you have a comment? Well, let's stay on this one for a moment. I like this approach that you've outlined. I'm struck by sort of bike priority and how that seems much more accommodating than what we currently experience. And just generally speaking, when you put that up, I said, okay, I kind of like that approach. If you could help me understand a little bit more, and let's see, go, I don't know how many slides it is now, a couple, and I'll tell you when to stop.
Go forward.
Go forward. Keep going. Forward.
I go backwards.
Okay. Well, stop there. My question is, we've had a considerable discussion, somewhat in tandem with your thoughts, but also unique in some ways, about the importance and significance of the placement of the downtown transit center. And you talk about entryway. And I'm curious, since that hasn't been decided yet, how you're going to incorporate that in the plan itself, and if that's going to help us make a decision as to where we might favor that location. So tell me how you're going to address that.
Good.
That's a great question.
I guess this is why I get paid the big bucks.
I know,
right?
I know.
Not really. Anyway, right now, the way we are structuring this is knowing that the location of the transit center hasn't landed at any one location. At least we know it's within a defined area. So we're working within that defined area in the context of this plan until that's decided. So we're trying to go as far as we can until it's ultimately decided on, where it's going to land, whether it's under the freeway or at 4th and Heatherton. But it's at least within a 1 or 2 blocks of where we know it's going to be. So, I mean, for now, that's how we're looking at this. We may get to a point where we have to take a look at, let's say, 2 options that we put into the plan. It depends upon the timing of when, of course, the transit center project is ultimately presented in its location. But that's how we're going to handle it, at least for now.
I know it's awkward since the decision has been made. I get that. At the same time, I also think that it's a significant factor when you're talking about welcoming. And I think I get a different sense of, based on I'll call it 2 locations, could be more, but let's say the 2, and what the consequence is. And it would seem to me it would be helpful to us as a community to get some thoughts or recommendation. I don't know, again, how it's structured in this context, but it would be helpful to us as a community to have some input from those of you that have studied this closely as to what that location, the difference might appear to be, and how it's functional, and the gateway, and that whole concept. At least I would think that would be valuable for us to get your input on that. And I recognize that there's some difficulty, but it seems to me that they're pronounced, the differences. They may be within the same, I'll say a couple blocks, but I think, and maybe I'm wrong on this, I'm willing to consider anything, but as I see it, they're significantly different in terms of your objective, which is welcoming in Centerville. So somewhere, put that in the back of your hat, if you would, and perhaps help us with that point.
This is where the word gateway becomes real critical.
Correct. Right. And again, I see it almost day and night, quite frankly. So that would be helpful.
Thank you.
What we've talked about. Traffic on 4th Street is interesting. I know there are pros and cons, but we do have a lot of businesses that go semi-crazy when we close 4th Street for the farmer's market because there's not the same degree of traffic. And so I'd be interested in knowing more about that from your committee as to whether or not that's advisable when you take in consideration downtown is a business district after all. It's not, you know, tourist, you know, let's parade up and down the street, but it is to accommodate our businesses, which are quite important to the city. So jury's out as far as I'm concerned on that. I would like to know more about it from your perspective particularly. So, Larry, you've talked about. That's all I have with regard to those items. Or the first, I guess, the first of 3. Didn't you have 2 others?
Yeah, the street framework prioritization was the second one, and the comments are very helpful.
Maybe it could get, and I'm also thinking, and this is sort of just sitting here thinking about stuff, so it's not perhaps well thought out. I appreciate the opportunity for the council to provide some input, but I'm also wondering if it might be beneficial, helpful to everybody, that is your committee, if we're at some point in time, if it's appropriate, I don't know if it is or not, but if it's appropriate for the council to meet with the committee just to share some thoughts and to hear it directly from us and vice versa, back and forth. So I don't know, think about that if you would. And your last point was key takeaways. Any key takeaways, folks? Anybody?
Is there a slide associated with that?
Well, no, I think that was the last request of the 3 items.
I was just casting a broader net to think about the information in the downtown profile report or any other things that you'd like to share with us tonight.
Could I return to the design principles for a minute? Sort of building on the comment that the mayor made about the importance of our businesses downtown and the purpose. I know sort of implicitly in all of these design principles is to create a friendly and welcoming place for our businesses and their customers. But I'm wondering if we could make an explicit reference to businesses or our economic development goals, perhaps in number 5, to create a development program and policies that support city goals in the economic development process as well as others. I know it's built into all of those things sort of in a hidden way, but if we could explicitly call that out to remember what the district exists for. Because it's so great that we have this opportunity to have the precise plan going on at the same time we have the general plan, so we have to move our microscope up and down, but this is a great opportunity, and to build those two, the interconnections between those two would be great.
Thank you.
I think it's a good point. I'm gonna throw this out, and again, maybe it's not worth anything. But I would hope that this would be entirely readable by every member of our community. And I look at number 4, create a comprehensive public realm through an interconnected network of civic spaces. And my first reaction is, what does that mean? What are we talking about there? I could probably sort my way through it, but it might be a bit of a, not struggle, but might be more effort than I would care to expend. So maybe you could simplify some of these things so that you guys know what you're talking about, no question about that, and words have meaning, of course. But it also has to be somewhat readable, I would suggest.
Thank you.
I don't know if that's a key takeaway or not. I'll put it in that category since we don't have any of those. Any others? Any other points? I think we've already gone public on this, haven't we? Remind me. No, I guess we haven't. Roger, thank you.
Roger Roberts, 223 Southern Heights Boulevard, San Rafael. I don't really have any comments on design issues, but something that has occurred to me that I need to say. Particularly with respect to adaptation to sea level rise where you have flooding areas. And we know generally where that is based upon many of the studies that have already been performed. The city needs to develop a way to finance the hardening or retreat or whatever is necessary to deal with the flooding areas. And you have a tool in your toolbox that needs to be brought to bear on that issue, and that is to create assessment districts. And if you do that, that will enable you to also tap into state funds because you'll be helping to pay for the adaptation. So as part of your planning process, dealing with climate change and flooding and sea level rise, an integral part of the plan has to be how are you going to finance it. And I think assessment districts is a perfect tool that you ought to bring to bear, and it ought to be part of the plan. Thank you.
Really good point, Raj. That's a major consideration, and we're not going to be able to, well, we may or may not, but unlikely, let's say, we'll be able to fund it as a city, and many cities are in the same situation, so I would hope that there'd be state and federal funding.
Could I make one comment
Yeah,
about
please,
that?
of course.
Because we are working on this sea level rise. We're at as you know, we prepared a white paper some years ago, and there's been all of these wonderful resources and efforts, great sources for us to build off of. And I mentioned the overlay earlier, that the sea level rise overlay, and it would serve more than one purpose. It would be an opportunity not only for zoning and building and construction, but identifying areas for adaptation and adaptation planning, as well as financing. So that overlay was also intended to be a tool for things like an assessment district. So, Roger Roberts' comments are spot on with regard to how we've had that in mind. So,
yeah, good point. And thanks again. Any further comments? Hearing, seeing none, let's go ahead and adopt.
So I think there are two
report.
things. Are they separate?
yes,
Do you
two
want them to be
actions:
separate?
accepting the
Okay.
report and adopting a resolution for the steering committee membership.
And to do them separately?
Yeah.
Okay. I make a motion that we accept the report.
Second?
Second, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Collin.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
Aye, matter carries 5-0, and now the adoption resolution.
I make a motion that we adopt the resolution regarding the steering committee members.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Collin.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
Aye, matter carries 5-0. Thanks once again. Good project. Really good job thus
Thank
far,
you.
I'm assuming, to completion. We'll move on to Citywide Budget C, Citywide Budget Capital Improvement Program, legal spending limit.
Thank you, Mayor. In our quest to get every city department to make a presentation to you tonight,
Oh, my
bringing up
goodness.
Nadine
We would
and
welcome
the
that. We'll-
Finance Department, and I'm going to ask Christine actually to do a couple opening comments on this one.
Oh,
Thanks.
good. Thank you.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Council and Mayor. I wanted to just acknowledge that this budget item that comes forward to you every year is an inordinate amount of work from staff. It's not just the budget numbers, the finance staff do an amazing job, but there's lots of months of collaboration and conversations. And this year in particular, Nadine came to me and said, I think we really need to tighten the belt and really look at where we can find efficiencies. And to her credit and to the credit of the directors and the managers and all the staff and the departments, they've really continued to look for ways to provide services smarter and better and with the most efficient use of resources. So I'm sure Nadine will touch on that a little bit, but I really wanted to acknowledge everyone, and the CIP and Public Works and the goals and objectives are also a labor of love, and they're, it all comes in this package, but there's months and months of time and energy and work that goes into this presentation, including Finance Committee. I know there's been lots of discussions with council members and the mayor about this leading up to tonight. So, and I really do want to particularly appreciate Nadine and her staff and Von Bach for all the work that they do to make sure these numbers are right. Mark Moses has also been behind the scenes helping out, and when we hired Nadine, we thought, how are we going to do this without Mark, who knew our budget so well, and Nadine's done a phenomenal job of not only getting up to speed, but raising the bar for us. So, turn it over to Nadine.
Boy, with that introduction.
Thank you,
I just sit there and
Christine.
smile, I think, if I were you.
Right? Okay,
In any
we're
case,
done.
welcome this
We're
evening.
done. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So good evening, Mayor and council members. Thanks for having me here tonight. Tonight, we are going to go over the fiscal year 1920 operating budget and also CIP plan. So we'll start out going over the fiscal year 18-19 financial update. We're not quite done yet, but we've got information through May and even some in June, so we'll go through that. I will take us through the fiscal year 1920 proposed budget and GAN limits, and then recommend the adoption of the budget. I don't plan on going over the CIP plan again or the goals and strategies, since those were brought to you in the June 17th council meeting, as well as open session, so study session. All right. So fiscal year 18-19 is almost done, and as we're ending up the year, we are projecting that revenues are going to come in a little bit higher than we originally expected. So we're looking at higher revenues of approximately $494K. The reason for this is primarily due to increase in sales tax, which is one time. We do not expect this going forward. In fact, sales tax is projected to be flat from what budget originally was. The increase is mainly due to auto sales and building and construction. So in working with our third-party sales tax consultant, they have identified these items as only one time, and so that's the surge there. The other piece of the increase in revenues is development fees have come in a little bit higher this year. This is mainly due to larger projects that we don't necessarily anticipate in future years, or at least not next year. There are no significant deviations expected for expenses, so we're on track there. And any required adjustments for other funds are not significant and will come to you at year-end cleanup. Speaking of the year-end update, in late August or early September, we'll come to you with the fiscal year 18-17 unaudited financials and the results there. In November, we plan on having the completed CAFR, and so we will report that out to you as well. All right, so let's move on to the fun stuff. Proposed budget for fiscal year 19-20. So if there's anything that you take away tonight, I'd like to recommend that it be these three things. First, while last year this did not happen, this year we were able to come to you with a balanced budget. This was mainly due to my wonderful peers here and their teams who really worked on reducing general fund expenditures. This was done in lots of different creative ways, and I'm really proud to report that we were able to do it. So balanced budget this year, and definitely hats off to the team. The second thing that I wanted to let you know is that for fiscal year 19-20, there's been a decrease in the MSERA rates, the contribution rates that the city would pay. This is approximately, it amounts to $1 million, and it's wonderful, but it is not expected to continue. And in fact, we already have information telling us that for fiscal year 2021, it's expected to increase, and probably even more, since the assumptions, there are certain assumptions that go into the contribution rates, and those have not all been met. So given that we had $1 million this year, what we did not want to do is use that towards ongoing operating expenses. And at the guidance of finance committee members, we have allocated this $1 million to the retirement fund. This is a separate fund. Certain expenses come out of the retirement fund, such as our pension bond obligation. So this $1 million will help in paying off the pension obligation bond. And then lastly, in order to keep up with just normal inflation in future years, I believe that we need to really consider additional revenues. So we've done a lot to expenses. We've analyzed them. We've looked at them. We're trying to cut certain things. We're being creative. If we want to keep our current services the way they are, then we really need to consider increasing revenues and finding sources for that. So summary of the citywide budget. For the general fund, you've got sources of about $85 million and uses of approximately the same. We were actually able to make $26,000, so yay. The general plan, you'll notice $393K in sources and about $1.4 million in uses. The general plan over time accumulates funds, and you know, this is the way that we plan it. So you save, 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 and then there's a time where you spend, spend, spend. And actually, as you probably know from the earlier presentation, this is where we're going to be spending. And so fiscal year 18-19 as well as fiscal year 19-20 has that increase in appropriations. We have special revenue, grant, trust funds. These are some of our restricted funds like the Measure A, gas tax, stormwater, and there's a bulk of projects that go into those restricted funds. But again, those are restricted funds, so we're not able to use them for general operating expenditures. The enterprise fund, the parking fund, is self-sufficient and continuing to do well. The internal service capital replacement fund, this is all of our different funds like vehicle replacement, the retirement fund. We've got building maintenance, liability, and actually if you look at Exhibit A, you'll see a list of all the funds. And so those are $18 million of sources and about $17 million of expenditures, but those, again, similar to the general plan fund, the plan is to save, 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 and then spend. Currently, I believe that we need to save a little bit more if we want to spend what, we think we need to be able to spend over the next few years. And then we have our essential facilities and other capital funds. So this one probably looks a little bit interesting to you because sources are only 4.1 million, and yet we've got expenditures of about 27 million. This is mainly related to the essential facilities projects, and the money came in last year as part of the bond proceeds. So that's revenue. So this year we're using some of that, but it's not considered a current year source. And then we do this accounting thing, which is adjusting for the internal service charges and the transfers, and so that's the negative 25 million. That's just so that we don't double count. So in summary, we have citywide sources of about 113 million and uses of 135 million. But more importantly, if we concentrate on the general fund for a little bit, since that's really the bread and butter of the city's operations. As far as revenues are concerned, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but sales tax is projected to be flat. With the closing of box stores and nothing really coming in to support that, we're really feeling the slowdown of this. Additionally, in prior years, we had one-time items that made sales tax a little bit higher, and we're not seeing any of that anymore. Our property tax is continuing to increase. It's increasing for fiscal year 19-20 at about 4%. This is good, but I'm not so sure that we can count on this going forward because there are talks of recessions, and if that's the case, then we'll see property tax start to quickly decline. And then for all of our, so sales tax and property tax, I did want to say though, is more than 50% of our revenues. So a lot going into that. The remaining revenues we've scrubbed and analyzed, and we're expecting a moderate growth of about 1 to 3% there. General fund expenses. So as mentioned earlier, the level of services are maintained. We're not removing any services. We're not necessarily adding too many, but level of services are maintained for fiscal year 19-20. The city does have several goals that remain unfunded. And so these are things like building maintenance for non-public safety owned property, compensation goals, additional infrastructure such as, larger pumps and things like that included in the CIP, unfunded liabilities for pension and health, which of course we're constantly trying to decrease, and then other new initiatives that come up that we want to focus on. And then lastly, always need to bring up that pension expense. It's approximately 20% of total budget, operating budget. So 20%, it's about 17.3 million. We do expect pension expense to decrease in about 10 years from now due to the way that the amortization works for the MSERA plan. So at 10 years, given everything goes okay and we haven't, well, not we, but MSERA hasn't completely messed up the assumptions or anything like that, which they don't expect, we will see a nice relief for pension expenses, which will allow us some extra money to do other things. We're continuing to fund our emergency reserves target, which is 10% of general fund expenditures. And so for fiscal year 1920, we'll see this ending at about 8.1 million. For other funds, as you probably very well know, we've got the Emergency Medical Services, which is often referred to as the Paramedic Tax Fund. This funds a portion of our firefighters and paramedics. This was approved on March 18th, and we did not increase the tax related to that. We also have our capital project funds, many of them. There are about 11 funds that contribute to our capital projects, and so you know, some of them being the building maintenance fund, the gas tax fund, the stormwater fund. So those are all included in the staff report if you're interested in reading about them. Certainly, we've got Measure A funding. It was about $487K for fiscal year 1920. This was approved on June 17th. We've got Measure D, which is the library parcel fund. And this one, actually, we recently went to council to increase the tax by CPI. So you should have seen that. This is the third year of Measure D, and it's going quite well. We've got the Parking Enterprise Fund, which is self-sufficient. Community Services with Recreation. This is a fund that is on its own. It receives revenues based on services that it offers. It doesn't quite break even though, so the general fund subsidizes that. And then we've got the Community Services Childcare and Preschool funds, and those almost break even. Childcare does, and preschool requires a little bit of subsidy as well. And that is also funded by state and local grants. As far as staffing is concerned, we are re-examining how our teams are organized so that we can become more efficient. One of the things that we have done for childcare is we've actually decreased headcount by 6 because preschool's kindergarten is now offered for the full day in San Rafael. And so we found that our revenues were not where we needed them to be, and so we decreased headcount by 6, which offset the loss in revenues. There were a few other staffing changes that were made, and this resulted in about $72K of additional expenses. This was all offset by other reductions in expenses. Moving on to our Gan Appropriations Limit. The new calculated limit is about $139 million. And the appropriations that we have subject to that limit is about $83 million, which leaves us with a buffer of additional appropriations of $56 million that we can add. And with that, I'd like to recommend adopting the resolution to approve the fiscal year 1920 budget and CIP, as well as adopt the resolution approving the Gan appropriation limits. And I'll open it up for questions.
Excellent report, truly outstanding. Thank you. Thank you for your report and the work leading up to it. And you're absolutely right in terms of the quality of the work. It's a collaborative effort, but certainly pointed in certain ways to you, Nadine. Questions, reactions? Andrew?
Yeah, Nadine, I just want to echo that. Your presentation, both written and oral, just a model of clarity, so thank you so much. One area that we've talked about in the past, which is over the years, the leakage of sales tax revenue or sales tax to the internet. and then the effect of the Wayfair decision in enabling states to pass tax schemes that bring that sales tax revenue back to local jurisdictions. Where are we here in California and locally as far as when we might expect to see some of that sales tax come back to us from the internet?
That's a great question. So we are starting to see some of that sales tax come to us. Some of it, though, is coming through the pool, and so we don't get as much of that. It is continuing to be, you know, a work in process for California. Although we are seeing some sales tax from that, it's not the way it would be if someone were to walk down the street and purchase something there. So it's not dollar for dollar. I think that with the way that, you know, the internet is so available and people are shopping online more, this is going to get better. We're going to be able to collect more sales tax than we currently are, but we're just not quite there yet. So I'd give it about another year or two, and we can continue to assess it during that time.
But you don't see that moving the needle on our sales tax revenue?
Unfortunately not, no.
Thanks.
A follow-up question on that same vein. We've had a lot of discussion about our cannabis program, and I know you talked about it in the staff report, but for people that are watching this at home, can you speak to that?
Sure. Our cannabis program has started, and in November of 2018, that was the first quarter that we started collecting tax on that. So it was a partial quarter, but from November through March, we've collected about $78,000. And for next year, we're planning to collect about $120,000. So we're hoping as time goes on that this will continue to increase, and that's certainly what we're seeing. But again, with this one, time will tell. Yeah, I know that the state of California especially, it has not taken off as quickly as it was originally supposed to, so there were some bumps in the way, but hopefully we'll get through those and start collecting more.
Councilmember, just to add a couple things to that. That doesn't include, I don't believe, the different fees that the companies are, when they're getting licensed by the city in the first place, which is not an insignificant number. And then also, not all of the businesses that the council has approved are functioning yet. Primarily, we're seeing the delivery businesses, and we're not yet seeing all of the manufacturing and the distribution and that sort of thing. So we have more coming on board. And then lastly, it's been a fairly recent decision when the council decided to allow the delivery companies to do adult use in addition to the medicinal. So we expect to see a difference there as well. So it's definitely it's always been hard to predict, and it's also changing as rules change and new businesses come on board.
Great, thank you.
Good points. However, we at one point in time, not so far in the distant past, anticipated 450,000 more or less this year, and $1 million, up to $1 million. I frankly don't think it's going to reach that. So in terms of projections and so forth, I think we better be pretty careful with regard to this source of revenue. That's my sense. John, member of the Finance Committee, any comments? Let's open to the public. Anyone from the public? Seeing none, I just have a couple of things. Let's see, where do I want to go? The essential facilities, Andrew and I sit on the Essential Facilities Committee and are pleased to report, in large part, thanks to Bill and others, certainly, we're on time, on schedule. Those are large projects, $80 million in total, but we are where we need to be, and so I'm pleased about that. Pension fund. We're obviously paying, and I want to make sure everybody's clear on this, we're current with regard to our pension obligation. We continue to make those payments. It's a substantial number, 20%, 17 million is a big number, but we are continuing to pay that on a current basis. And you're right about the long-term prognostication. It's going to drop down after 10 years or so, 12 maybe, to a more reasonable percent of our total revenues, but nevertheless we're covering that. I think most of you know that I'm not satisfied with where we stand with regard to our goal to reach compensation levels within the county, and so I've suggested, there'll be further discussion, but I've suggested that we have our workshop, which is coming up in, I don't know, September, October, devoted to that issue rather than some others, because we're in pretty good shape, I think, with regard to other matters. This one, I don't think we are in the right place, and we may want to take some action to put us in a better place with regard to that item. Let's see. Just for your, I think you know this, but just so you're aware, if not, we have included members of our public safety on the Finance Committee, police, fire, and SEIU representatives in the committee itself, and that their input has been valuable. So I think everyone is better informed as to where we're at and what we're doing. It's a little complicated for many, myself included, but you've helped in that regard, and I think it also helps the organization to be better informed. There are no secrets. Here it is what it is. So that seems to be working, I think, reasonably well. So with that, thanks again. Great job. This is a major task, we know, and appreciate. So thank you so much for what you've done. Thank you. Is there a motion with regard to this item?
I'm happy to make a motion approving the resolution, and I did also want to echo the thanks of the mayor as well as Christine. I mean, a huge amount of work, and we didn't discuss the CIP up here, but just we have discussed it in the past, and so DPW had their day in the sun where we went through that, and I know we all appreciate each department head looking at their organization and figuring out, okay, where can we be as even smarter than we already are. So we really appreciate that, and it reflects in the balanced budget. So it's nice to make a motion that we approve the resolution.
Second.
Moved and second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Collin.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
Matter carries 5-0, and
Make a motion approving the resolution for the Gan Appropriation Limit.
Second.
thank you. Moved and second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Collin.
Aye.
Councilmember Gamblin.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McCullough.
Aye.
Mayor Phillips.
Matter carries 5-0, and thanks once again. We'll now close with council members' reports and future agenda items. Anything? Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, just reiterating, 3 of us were able to attend the opening of the Pickleweed Park new play structure, and I had received an email saying that it is truly officially now the best park in Marin. So just putting that out there, and I concur. It was well attended by childcare and many neighborhood members. The kids were amazing that they sat and listened while all the adults made comments, and then they raced on there. So that's really exciting. In addition, there's also now a electronic sign out in front of the Alboro Center, which will enable us to communicate directly with the folks that live in the neighborhood in English, Spanish, as well as Vietnamese. So really working to put needed resources into the community.
Good report. Yeah, it was exciting, and thanks again for the effort to bring it to us. Any other,
Just
Mary
one
Beth?
last thing, I feel compelled to draw everyone's
Sure.
attention to this. We processed through tonight a record number of items, of pages of reports, and of what could be contentious and divisive issues in an orderly way, I think to a large extent because of the hard work our staff does. I don't know that it's a labor of love, but
That might be stretching
I hope
it.
we have other things to love, but because all these reports on everything, the consent agenda are so thoughtfully prepared, and we come to this meeting, prepared, read, and everything is thought through, it makes it look so easy that we can just blow through all these items because it's done ahead of time, and we get such a good job from our staff and from each other. So thank you, everyone, for making us an efficient, well-oiled machine.
Good point. Thank you for making the points. You
I
agree?
second that.
You second that?
Yes.
I'll just add a couple of quick things, just so you know what I'm up to. I mentioned tomorrow, somewhat related to San Rafael, have a meeting with Marin IJ regarding SMART and some of the issues that are before us were a little troubling, including this evening. I sent a letter to the Senate regarding AB 516, and thanks for your response. 516 is talking about opposition because there were some parking issues that didn't seem to work for our, particularly the canal area, if you will. So I've done that. Wildfire meeting's terrific, MUP is tomorrow, so hopefully everybody can come out for that at about 2 o'clock, 2 to 3. So it's nice to see that, at least segment 1, done. And I guess you're bringing the champagne, right? 2:15. 2:15. It'll be gone by then, I'm sure. In any case, a lot of good